for men, and I'm not trying to be overly stereotypical here, but it's true. We experience the love of our wives in direct proportion to, at least, not exclusively by, but in direct proportion to how respected we feel in that conversation.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I'm back with Brandon Beckley, and we're talking about homeschooling and fatherhood and their journey, he and his wife's journey of getting into homeschooling and how all of that unfolded. So if you missed our last episode with Brandon, go back and listen to that, and the rest of this week will make a little bit more sense to you. But before we get back into our conversation with Brandon, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for great homeschool curriculum that will truly teach your kids from a strong biblical worldview, check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. They will encourage a love of learning, and they'll help your child develop a strong biblical worldview, and they love to be part of your homeschool journey. Check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Brandon, welcome back to the podcast. I want to talk about fatherhood, and we kind of left off the last episode talking a little bit about your role as dad and about you homeschooling your kids right now in the season that you and your family are in. But I want to talk about the importance of fatherhood, because one of the things that I think everybody sees today is one that we look at where our culture is, and there's a lot of fatherless homes for many reasons. But I also see that there are a lot of homes where there's a dad in the home, and he's in the home and he works hard. He loves his family and he works hard to provide for them. But when he's home, he feels like he's just exhausted. And I think this kind of goes back to you have a new and different understanding of being home and being the caretaker of your family and your children. And I think oftentimes dads don't understand that. So they come home and they check out because they're tired. They've been working all day. And what they might forget is that mom's been working hard all day too. And she desperately, desperately needs his help. So I would love for you to talk to these dads. We don't have a lot of dad listeners, but maybe this is one of those episodes where moms can, listen with their husbands. Talk to dads about the importance of them being present in the home, not just being home, but truly being engaged with their family.
Everything you said there is actually, there's so many things you just said that are super important.
Did I take all your points? I'm sorry.
Not at all. I just want to talk about all of them. That's the problem.
Let's do it.
Because I'm gonna, if you don't mind, if I take this a little cumulatively.
Nope.
Let's go back, because you said something super important. You talked about not absent dads, but dads who are around but not present.
Right.
Let's call them the disengaged dads, maybe. I was looking up some stats before we jumped in today on kind of the state of fatherlessness in our country, at least in the U.S. And there was a U.S. Census Bureau report that said 18.3 million children, or 1 in 4, are living without a biological step or adopted father in the home.
Wow. That's huge.
It's gigantic.
Yeah.
So let's just take that number and say that 75% of kids have some type of father figure. It doesn't say biological dad, and that's a whole other conversation to have, right? I'm biased on this. Big disclaimer. I grew up without a dad. So I have very strong feelings on this subject matter. And I know guys who grew up in our generation who grew up with a dad, but he wasn't there. He was either time-wise or just emotionally unavailable. This is hard, right? Because in the, let's say, 70s, 80s, and 90s especially, men were taught to become more sensitive, and even told to be more feminine.
Yeah.
That's not the right approach.
Right.
It's okay to be a man.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever. And to be emotionally available. It doesn't mean you have to be soft. It means you have to learn to communicate, whether you're a woman or a man, communicate about your emotions. These are important things to be able to do.
Yeah.
And what's an appropriate way to deal with those emotions? What's an inappropriate way to deal with those emotions? Because kids are watching us. The only way that I know how to be a father, I had a couple positive male role models as I grew up for short periods of time. But honestly, it was after I got saved in my early 20s that I was driving across the state one day in the middle of a rainstorm. And I had this epiphany that for the first time in my life, I had a relationship with someone who could be the perfect example for a father to me, and that was God.
Mm.
There is no better example as a father. And I think people who grew up in difficult situations, especially men, have a hard time trusting people in authority or figuring out who to emulate. We can emulate God. All right, we can try to be Christ-like in our approach as dads. That's my first thing. And you said that maybe not a lot of dad listeners, maybe more mom listeners. I think yes, there's something that I could share for the moms to encourage the dads, but also maybe to understand the dads better. I think that I don't know this. I don't have stats on this one, but my gut is that most dads who are not around, even though they're in the picture, it's not what they want, but they don't know how to do all the things. And I remember, as we were trying to go through my health journey, I was in full-time pastoral ministry. It was a very large church, busy, all the time busy, always gone.
Yeah.
And I was on a short-term disability leave looking for diagnoses. And it was a lot of pain. But one day I remember this pain had subsided. So much so that I could get up and go outside. And I went outside on a Sunday with my wife. And I watched our kids playing in the grass and realized in that moment, my son, who was almost 6 at the time, I had never spent a Sunday outside with my kids while they played, ever.
Wow.
And I just will never forget that moment. And I'm not saying that working hard in ministry is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I believe man was made to work.
Sure.
And we should work hard. But who all I ever wanted was to have a family, to be a husband and a father, was doing the same thing. I didn't even realize it. And I think that in the same way as, I'll speak, my wife might listen to this later and say, no, you're wrong, but we'll find out. But I think in the same way that she focuses on different things than I do, she focuses more on the home. That's just what she loves.
Sure.
She might notice that all these things aren't organized and this needs to be put away and we haven't meal prepped, and not notice the kids needing attention. I think it's everybody just doesn't notice the time that's slipping away from them so fast.
Yeah.
So I think that for the dads, let's go with assuming the best first. Assume the best and assume they want to be good dads. Let's just go with those guys, because I can't help the guys who don't want to be good dads.
Right.
And they're out there. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
They're out there. But the ones who want to be good dads, I would say if you're a mom listening to this and you feel like that's your husband, I would just say go and tell him thank you for what he does do for the home and what he does do as a father and a husband, and ask him if he'd like to be able to spend more time with the kids. Maybe just, hey, do you wish you had more time with the kids? Because it may be that he does.
Yeah.
But also, I'm an extreme extrovert. If you're listening to this, you may have noticed that already. I like people. And I had 5 services every Sunday at the church, and I was the guy in charge of just all the guest experience, right? So I was always out in the lobby. I was always talking to people. As extreme extrovert as I am, I would come home and want nothing more than to hide in a hole and not talk to people, including, and I don't like hearing this come out of my mouth, including my kids.
Yeah.
But that wasn't fair to them. And I don't know, every family's different. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution to this, but I think it begins with a conversation, having empathy, and there's a gap there. And this, I'm stealing this from somebody, but this phrase, fill the gap with trust. If you're a husband and wife having this conversation, what I would say in every wedding that I ever did, remember when you have a conflict, you're fighting for each other, not against each other.
Yeah.
Go and fight for your husband and what you want and what you hope for.
Sure.
And don't assume you know everything he's thinking and feeling, and ask him. And just have a conversation, assuming that the answer is way better than you think it is. I don't know if that's helpful or better, if that even answers your question.
Yeah, no, it is. And not just fighting for each other, but fighting for your family and your kids too. I think that's important. And I think people don't sometimes realize that their family needs to be fought for. Like, we know we're in this battle, but where do we stand in the battle as moms, as dads, as kids? And we often talk about Ephesians 6, armoring up, but we have to armor up for the battle that we're in, but we have to know what part of the battle we're in. Where are we placed in this? And so we are fighting for our families. We're fighting for each other. And the enemy wants nothing more than to tear families apart. And that almost always in the family, almost always starts with mom and dad tearing apart their relationship first, because if you break down the marriage relationship, you can break down the entire family so easily. And so the enemy is fierce. I mean, he is on the attack right now for families. And so we have to be so intentional. And I really appreciate your take on that. I appreciate you talking to the moms and just saying, hey, maybe your husband really does want to spend more time with his family. Talk to him and ask him. I mean, how many moms ask that question and then asking the question, how can we make this happen? What changes do we need to make so that you can be more present? But it's hard sometimes. And I'm just going to throw this out there. As a wife, I know for myself, it's hard to talk to I'm able to talk to my husband about pretty much anything, but we've been married almost 30 years. And so we've had a lot of practice, but I would say, especially in those earlier years, if I wanted to approach him about something, it was hard because it would often come across as attacking him. Like, you're not doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not being a good dad because you're not spending time with our kids or enough time with our kids. So I would love for you to answer that question. We're going to go to break, but I would love for you when we come back to answer that question, like, how can a mom approach her husband in a respectful and loving way to say, hey, how can we do this better without offending him? So we'll talk about that, but first we'll be right back. Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. Are you looking for a homeschool curriculum that goes beyond textbooks and truly engages your children in the joy of learning? Apologia's award-winning curriculum is written by homeschool parents to specifically meet your needs and captivate your students with hands-on activities and experiments that make learning unforgettable. With an easy-to-follow, open-and-go format, Apologia takes the stress out of planning and provides a simple roadmap that can easily be tailored to your family's needs. Explore live classes or self-paced courses designed to accommodate every student's unique learning style. Elevate your child's education, spark their curiosity, and nurture a lifelong love for learning with Apologia. Discover Apologia today at apologia.com. We are back with Brandon. All right. So before the break, we're talking about dads being present and the need for that, of course, because it's what every family needs. It's what every child needs. Every child needs their dad to be present, not just to provide food, for the table and a roof over their heads and clothes for their bodies, but they desperately, and boys and girls alike, they need daddies. How can a mom who is recognizing that dad maybe needs more of a presence in the home, how can she respectfully and lovingly go to her husband and talk with him about that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it really boils down to the same as it would for any conversation that might be contentious. That's why one of the things I said ahead of time was, fill that gap with trust. One of the things I tried to do was not always good, going into what we would call critical conversations in ministry, was try to get in my head that the person I'm about to go talk to was a son or a daughter of the King of the universe, who loved them so much, who thought they were so worth his love that he sent his son to die for them.
Yeah.
And so before I go and have a conversation with them, can I see that person? Yeah, it's your spouse. I get it. You love them, but it's a different thing. Can I see them more like the way the Lord sees them? And go in not assuming any negativity, not ever bringing up the past and what's already happened. These are really hard things. Like, it's one thing to say it, but it's like really, really hard to do that.
Yeah.
And for men, and I'm not trying to be overly stereotypical here, but it's true. By and large, we experience the love of our wives in direct proportion to, at least, not exclusively by, but in direct proportion to how respected we feel in that conversation.
Yeah.
If I don't feel respected by my wife, I do not respond well. There's a great book about this. I don't have to rehash the whole thing. But And if my wife does not feel cared for by me,
Yeah.
she will not respond well. We've tested this. It's true.
The book is
Right?
called Love and Respect.
Eggerichs, right?
Yep.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Emerson
Dr.
Eggerichs. Yeah. Great book. Read it. Crazy Cycle. It's real.
Yes.
So first and foremost, if you can't get your posture right, you're not going to get anywhere in any conversation. And now I would say that, by the way, for the husbands as well, right? I cannot go to my wife, hey, baby, this, that, and the other thing didn't happen. What happened here? I can't do that.
Yeah.
Hey, baby, how are you feeling today? What's going on? Do you need anything from me? Like, I don't know. Just like be a human and love that person you promised God you would for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And the same way, husband and wife. Okay, so start there. And then try to figure out in your head what questions you can ask to find what you just may not see yet. And I think some of those questions are, what are you dealing with right now?
Mm-hmm.
What's eating your lunch? What is just burdening you? Legit, not to be cheesy, how can I pray for you?
Yeah.
As your husband or as your wife, how can I pray for you?
Yeah.
And then, do you wish you had more time with the kids?
Or with me, your wife.
Or with me. Yes, absolutely. And I would be shocked. Again, we're talking about dads who were in the home. I'd be shocked if 99% didn't say, yeah, of course I do.
Right.
And then maybe just follow up with that with, how can I help with that? Not, you need to change some things so this is possible. It is what it is right now. Now, you may be in the case where you and I had a little bit of communication beforehand and the word man cave came up in correspondence.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I have thoughts on this. I think it's entirely appropriate for a man or a woman to have a place they can retreat to that is a fortress of solitude. Sometimes we need that. If it's financially feasible, doesn't hurt the family, and doesn't destroy the family, doesn't take away from family time, right? This is super important. I love that you said boys and girls need their daddies, right? Like, and their moms. We mean both. This is why the Lord made it this way.
Right.
My daughter, I want her to see how I treat my wife so that she knows what to expect. My son, I want him to say the same so that he knows how to act. Yeah. They both need their daddies. And there's a million more reasons than that. Like statistically, kids without a father in the home or a father who's present but doesn't engage are 4 times more likely to live under the poverty level as adults.
Wow.
If you're not a Christian, take that stat and do with it what you will. That's true. That's a problem. So just engage in the conversation. My wife and I have entirely different communication styles. I'm the communicator. She's not. She's an internal processor. I'm not. We've worked really hard to communicate and have these conversations because if we didn't, our marriage would not have worked.
Right.
But we made a covenant agreement with the living God of the universe.
Yeah.
And honestly, I shiver when I think of that because I meant what I said when I went into the thing, no matter what, if I don't feel like I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so I'm preachy. But I think that if you're not able to have that conversation, it's important to get time with the kids, but that is going to be, you can push back on me here, Yvette, but I think that's going to be difficult as long as you and your husband aren't on the same page with your marriage and what the purpose of it is.
Yeah.
And so if you're struggling to identify the way you should engage with each other, I think that's a really important conversation to start with as well. And, you talked about sickness and health. When I would do weddings and I was doing premarital counseling, I would sit down with a couple and I would literally say, this is a little edgy, I'm sorry, but I would literally say, hey, imagine you've been married for 5 years and suddenly your spouse, wife or husband, it becomes a double amputee or a quadriplegic. You now have to care for their bathroom needs.
Yeah.
You have to pick them up and move them places. You have to drive them to doctor's appointments. Physical intimacy has become impossible. What will you do? Will you stay? Are you committed to that? If you will not be, do not marry.
Yeah.
And if you can get to that place, then no, we don't know what will actually happen.
Sure.
But if you can get your head wrapped around, no matter what, I'm going to love this person, then I think the communication becomes not easy, but possible.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about asking questions too, instead of just saying, this is what needs to happen. And we talk about that so often on the podcast with our kids of asking those heart-probing questions, right? To just get into the conversation and understand one another. And I think that's just important in the marriage too, asking those questions, because sometimes we assume that we know what the other person is thinking or feeling. And in reality, we don't actually know what they're thinking or feeling. And so asking those questions opens up a door to be able to have those conversations with one another. And, I love the book you mentioned, Love and Respect. That book was instrumental in our marriage many years ago, probably 20 years ago when it first came out. And it really is important to learn to respect your husband and for the husband to know how to love his wife. And for the most part, most couples kind of tend down that road of love and respect and the need for both of those things. And so, that's good stuff. Thank you for sharing your heart with that. And that's a lot for people to think through, as we're trying to navigate this, just navigate family, and for dads to be present, for them to be available to their kids and available to their wives, and for wives to help their husbands know how important their role is in the home. Because so many times I think, and to be honest and transparent, I find myself doing the same thing. Like I take control of the home and of our kids and of homeschooling and parenting because Garrett's working most of the time. And even though he works from home, he works a lot. And so I take that on, and I kind of forget sometimes that, not on purpose ever, but, oh, wait a minute, I have a partner in this, and we're supposed to be doing this together. And so bringing him into my world of parenting, and he participates. He's an incredible father, an incredible husband. But I'm grateful for his interest in being part of our family.
I don't doubt that about Garrett. He strikes me as a gentleman who has many good dad jokes, and I appreciate that about a man.
He really
dad
does.
Jokes are excellent. That is a great love language, by the way. We'll add that one. But if I can say one more thing on that,
Sure.
Yvette, I think as you're talking, I was thinking, for the dads who maybe have not just intentionally thought about it, because look, it's out there, right? They just do the thing. They work, they come home, they spend the weekends, they go back to work. Okay.
Yeah.
For those dads, maybe we're hearing this, or the wives who are thinking about their husbands as those dads, I think a really good question is, if you're the dad, what was my dad like if I had one? Am I doing the same thing? Probably. And we don't like that, but it's true. And if we are, let's not ask, am I meeting that bar? Because that's not your bar.
Yeah.
Let's ask, and this is a question I try to ask myself, and I don't do it all the time. I'm not a perfect dad all the time. I'm not. Let's try to ask ourselves, I think, is what I try to ask myself. Not, am I doing enough? Or am I doing okay? Am I doing the right thing? Not, is this what my dad, is this enough? Is this better than not even if this better? Yeah, probably. Right. Is it the right thing? And if it's not the right thing, let's figure out what that is and work toward it. You can literally go in a conversation with your husband or your wife or whatever and say, hey, are we doing the right thing with our kids?
Yeah.
And if not, what do we want our parenting to look like? And how can we move forward in that? And then you guys communicate. It'll be great.
Yeah. And I think every single family throughout life, throughout parenting, has to make changes. I mean, we've done it so many times where you just have to redirect and say, okay, this thing that we've been doing this way isn't working so well, so we need to take a different direction. And it's hard because you kind of get in the rut of doing the same thing every day. But it takes intentionality to make the changes that are necessary to do the things that are best for your family. So anyway, we are out of time, but we're going to come back, and tomorrow we're going to talk more about homeschooling. We're going to talk about Made to Homeschool and all kinds of other fun things. So Brandon, tell people where they can find out more about you and your ministry.
Absolutely. You can just go to madetohomeschool.com. That's with a 2, MADE2, the number 2, homeschool.com. See all the things there. We're not important. All the moms that run the thing are. You see me trying to hide in the background again, but that's where you get all the things.
Sounds great. We'll put that link in the show notes. And again, if you guys are interested in signing up for his online conference, it's not his. Again, he's, like he said, he's the background guy. It's being run by a bunch of moms, and there are some great speakers at this conference. So if you want to be part of it, sign up at schoolhouserocked.com/brave. schoolhouserocked.com/brave. We'll put that link in the show notes. Have a great rest of your day. And if you've not yet seen the movie Schoolhouse Rocked, check it out, schoolhouserocked.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye.
Laughing in the face of imposter syndrome and coming to you from the epicenter of manly overconfidence, I'm your host, Yvette Hampton, and you are listening to The Thinking Dad.
Even if we're able to push the evildoers and the totalitarians back for another generation, maybe if we work really hard, maybe even 2 generations, if they've got the young people, it's over.
I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel to be able to go into Babylon and not fall.
We're in that very beginning part of the cycle for tough times. We've been fat and happy. We've been enjoying we're lazy because we enjoy so much freedom. We got all these blessings, and why would you go do the hard work? And so for a long time now, decades, we haven't had to do the hard work. We've been living on the fumes of previous generations paying the price. And we got to raise the bar and say, I'm willing to give more of my life, that's my time, more of my money, of course, that's our fortune, and more of my sacred honor, which is my reputation. I'm willing to put it all on the line. Every single one of us has to be willing to do that.
Join us for the first season of The Thinking Dad at thinkingdad.net.
Our culture has done this thing. I think it was amplified by COVID lockdown stuff, where we don't need community, or if we have community, it should only be the community that reaffirms what we already believe. It should already be the community that tells us we are okay the way we are.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. Community not only supports me in my homeschool journey, community got me to homeschool.
Yeah.
Right? It was surrounding myself with those people where I could absorb what they were doing. I started to understand their world. It started to be less scary. And in the same way someone might convert to Christianity, let's say, because they start spending a lot of time with Christian friends and they see what they live like, I want some of that, right? Well, I was spending time with a bunch of homeschool people and realized, I want some of that.